The first bank robbery in the United States occurred in March 1831. Two men, James Honeyman and William J. Murray, entered the City Bank of New York using forged keys. This allowed them to empty the vault of more than $245,000 in bank money. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, robbery is the taking or attempting to take anything of value from the care, custody, or control of a person or persons by force or threat of force or violence, or by putting the victim in fear. By contrast, burglary is unlawful entry of a structure to commit a felony or theft. The 1920s and 1930s saw a significant increase in bank robberies in the United States. This led to the formation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the designation public enemy for significant wanted criminals. This era saw the rise of famous gangs such as the Dillinger Gang, the Barrow Gang, and the Barker, Trapeze Gang. Other famous public enemies included Pretty Boy Floyd and Machine Gun Kelly. J. Wesley NEILL, born on April 9, 1965. In 1983, NEILL joined the United States Army. He met Robert Grady Johnson in February 1984 at a bar and became romantically involved. NEILL was discharged in the summer of 1984 after disclosing that he was homosexual and quickly began having financial difficulties. NEILL and Johnson shared an apartment in Lawton, Oklahoma and a joint checking account at the Geronimo Bank. The account had frequent checks returned due to insufficient funds. They were frequently at the bank to work out their money problems. The Geronimo Bank was a small facility, housed in a prefabricated building. It usually had only 2 tellers and no surveillance cameras or security guards. NEILL commented on more than one occasion on the absence of the security measures and how easy he thought it would be to rob the bank. On December 12, 1984, NEILL shopped for guns at a local pawn shop, but he was informed that a buyer must be at least 21 years old and NEILL was only 19. On December 13, Johnson applied for a gun permit. That same morning, NEILL went to a travel agent and tried to purchase flights to Nassau leaving at 6 p.m. the next day. On December 14, NEILL and Johnson returned to the pawn shop and purchased a revolver seen on NEILL's previous visit. Shortly after 1 p.m. on December 14, NEILL entered the First Bank of Chattanooga in Geronimo and forced the 3 tellers to the back room where he had them lie face down on the floor and stabbed them to death. The 3 employees were stabbed a total of 75 times. Mullenix was 6 months pregnant. 3 customers entered the bank while NEILL was attempting a decapitation of one of the tellers. The customers were taken to the back room and shot in the head. Ralph Zeller, 33, died from his wounds, becoming the 4th and final murder victim. Belen Robles, 15, and her husband Reuben Robles, 20. would recover from their head wounds. NEILL attempted to shoot the couple's 14-month-old daughter, Marie, but the gun was out of bullets. NEILL denied attempting to shoot the 5th, an 18-month-old child. The child's father testified, however, that he saw someone point a gun at his child's head and fire several times. The weapon, by this time, was out of ammunition. NEILL and Johnson then flew to San Francisco, where they spent some of the approximately $17,000 stolen from the bank on expensive jewelry and clothing, hotels, limousines, and cocaine. NEILL's attorney, James Hankins, says that the pair planned to commit suicide when the money ran out, but FBI agents arrested the pair there 3 days after the robbery. The state had initially tried Neil and Johnson jointly. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, however, reversed their resulting convictions, holding, among other errors, that the trial court should have severed their trials. Prior to his second trial, Neil gave a videotaped interview to a religious television program, The 700 Club, and wrote several letters to an author writing a book about the murders. Neil also wrote letters and made telephone calls apologizing to several victims. In these communications, Neil admitted committing the crimes. Based on this evidence, the jury convicted Neil of 4 counts of first-degree malice murder, 3 counts of shooting with intent to kill and 1 count of attempted shooting with intent to kill. At sentencing, the state charged and the jury found, as to each murder, 3 aggravating factors. Neil had created a great risk of death to more than one person. He had committed the murders to avoid arrest and prosecution. And the murders were especially heinous, atrocious or cruel. The jury imposed 4 death sentences, as well as 20 years imprisonment for each non-capital conviction. Neil and Johnson were arrested on December 17, 1982, in San Francisco, California. Neil was sentenced to death twice, once in 1985 and again in 1992. During the time of his incarceration, he converted to Christianity at first, and then to Buddhism. The first death sentence was overturned due to procedural errors. J. Wesley NEILL was pronounced dead at 6:18 p.m. as outside the prison death penalty opponents prayed for the inmate, his victims and their families, prison officials and others involved in the execution. Nearby, death penalty supporters waited patiently, holding signs with pictures and information about slain loved ones. Neil was executed for fatally stabbing 3 employees and fatally shooting a customer of the First Bank of Chattanooga branch in Geronimo, Oklahoma. Before the lethal injection was administered, Neil, strapped to a gurney, craned forward looking into a camera that broadcast the execution to family members, and apologized. "I want everyone to know that I'm really sorry. Not because I'm dying but for the horrible thing that I did," said Neil, who became emotional as he spoke. "I hope it brings you comfort to know Robert Johnson wasn't in that bank. I know you think he was, but he wasn't." Johnson was Neil's lover and co-defendant during their initial trial. Some speculated that Johnson, who was given a life without parole sentence in a new trial in 1992, was at the bank and helped Neil. As Neil gave his last statement, his voice quivered and he complained of being dizzy. "Are they starting?" he asked. As the lethal injection was administered, Neil prayed until he lost consciousness. His left shoulder twitched and the color drained from his face. Neil was pronounced dead about 3 minutes after the execution began at 6:15 p.m. He was 37 years at the time of his execution. Thank you for watching Death Row.